SM Char.
We read American Carnage this week.
It's really good.
It is really good. It's really heavy. This I read it as it was coming out initially, and now reading it all in one sitting, I liked some things more and I liked some things less about it. But what did you all think?
I really liked the art. It kind of, I mean, I don't know if I'm qualified to say this, but it reminded me of Watchmen a lot. Like, I don't know, the 9-panel grids and kind of like the thin lines and the color style kind of muted. I really liked it.
I agree on some aspects of that as well. Like, I felt it a time or two. While I'm certainly not like acting like he's Gibbons, it I don't know, like almost like the way you move around the room sometimes felt a little bit like Gibbons.
Like he's got a real good sense of place and knows where everything is, even when it's not on the panel.
Which was nice because when you're hearing these people converse about things of such import, it was nice to get even more context for like where they are when they're having these conversations. And it was, oh my gosh.
Oh. So who wants to give us Jeff's patented 30-second breakdown?
Oh yeah, no, Jeff. I don't know if I could do that.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'm Mike.
Basically, go ahead, Wynn.
I was just gonna say, so it is so the premise is we open up with a FBI agent having just been lynched, and another FBI agent goes and decides to recruit one of her former colleagues to go undercover, try to get some dirt on our main antagonist in this, which is Wynn Morgan, who is a...
Sorry, buddy.
No relation.
I wasn't gonna say anything. Thanks, man. Who is, I would feel like very comfortable saying he's a bit of a cult leader. With their cult being very white supremacist, neo-Nazi, kind of in that vein. And he is getting ready to run for local office, I think. Or it was a little unclear to me if he was running for the local
Senate,
office
I
or
believe.
national.
But oh yeah, true.
Anyway, so the story follows our main character, who is the guy who's been recruited to go undercover, who's a former FBI agent, who is a biracial black man who is white passing. So he uses that to get in good with the racists and find out what's going on with them.
And he does it good.
So his character design, I think this book rides on. One of the many good things that it rides on. His character design is so good. His like quirky but not totally obtrusive nose. I mean, it's out there, but like I just love being able to, you never worried about who was who in this book, and that's sometimes in crime in general. Even like our man Jorge Fornes sometimes has a little bit of a hard time with using so much shadow because he's trying to be Ed Brubaker, and I think this dude Leandro Fernandez did such a good job of writing crime without overly using shadow. And when he did use shadow, it was these shots of like the totally silhouetted out people, and it was subtle.
And Leandro Fernandez did Old Guard, right?
Yes.
Which I had a much harder time telling characters apart in Old Guard than I did in this. There are a couple people in Old Guard that I just kind of lumped together. And sure, that's one person.
Definitely that should immediately also shout out The Colorist, which I know is a podcast favorite, being Mike.
That's a good point.
I feel like I'd have to go grab my volume to know who did the colors on Old Guard, but I feel like that also helps quite a bit with this, because there are a couple cases where I'm like, if this guy were colored a little differently, I don't know if I'd be able to tell him apart from like random FBI agent number 3.
Right.
Well, in a book about racism, the coloring was
because the covers are really, really good.
Oh, that was Ben Oliver, right?
Yes.
Ben.
Oh, got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember around the time that this was coming out, he just finished doing, I think he was doing like variants on Batman for a while,
Mhm.
and they were very pretty.
Does he do
Yeah.
interiors?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't.
It seems like the colors. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, cool. It seems like the colors kind of follow where they are in the action scene sometimes. Like you get these more blues and greens, and then you get kind of these wispy yellows that are more, seem like they're a little more contemplative sometimes.
Hmm.
I'm not finding it right now, but just some of the pictures of the sky or the sand and things like that.
Yeah, the colors definitely give you more than just a sense of scene changes.
Mhm.
But
the use of color palettes for that is really good. So
yeah,
props to the colorists. Palettes.
The art for me really reminded me of Eduardo Riso, who did the whole run of 100 Bullets. Just like a little bit cartoony, and when the shadow was super shadowy, like Nathan pointed out, it really reminded me of his stuff.
I was going to point out, like, there are elements of Jock in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of the shadowy stuff is very Jock. The character design is very much like the character design in Losers.
I was about to say, like, a lot
yeah.
of this reminded me of reading the Losers. So
How does that? How do all these comparisons sit for you in a book that has a great story, to be fair, but like it's a book that is made to be a series of contemplative gut punches, and it's like it has a very specific purpose other than just being sequential fiction that we pick up off of the shelves at the comics place. Like when you have all these other comparisons, does that distract you from what's here, or were you able to see it as like just what it is?
I didn't really think to compare it to anything until I was done. Like,
Yeah.
I just kind of took it page by page when I was reading it, and it's more just like flipping through it for stuff I want to talk about now that I'm like, oh yeah, that's like definitely a bit of a Losers vibe. Makes me think of some of Jock's work. So I don't think it's a detractor by any means. And oftentimes, like when I find those touchstones in my comics, it's rarely distracting unless it's done poorly. Like I'm finding something I dislike that's in common, but like if something reminds me of Jock, I don't think it's ever bad.
Yeah.
I definitely had it when I first got it and flipped through and saw it was Vertigo. I was like, oh, like how I read so much Vertigo in college. It must be from back then, and it has a little bit of that vibe. But I was like, oh, this is like this year, or it came out last year.
Yeah, I was about to say, even down to like the paper stock, it's
Yeah.
like pure old Vertigo. And
That was something I really liked when I opened it up. It's like, ooh.
I had that exact same experience. Like when I was reading it, I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. This message in here seems so timely. And so I just was automatically thinking it was written 10, 15, 20 years ago or something. And then it wasn't until I got to like somebody said like something about MAGA. And I was like, wait, what? And then I had to flip and look and see that it was like, oh, this just came out like last year or something.
It was one of the final Vertigo books. I think that it maybe got cut short either because Brian Hill tried to move on from doing comics. He hasn't really successfully left comics, or because Vertigo was just kind of pulling the plug. And if I remember right, it was originally supposed to be a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think this one was originally solicited as a 12 issue.
Yeah.
I just read the interview with him actually, and he said he had just decided, oh wait, no, I can do it in 9 after like the 4th issue, and then Vertigo's like, and we're closing, and he's like, well, good, because I only have 5 left. So he actually made it under the.
Nice. I wouldn't have minded another 3 issues.
Yeah, the ending was kind of, oh, that's it. That's us. Okay.
Yeah, the last couple issues definitely felt like a bit of a lot more happened between the issues, whereas the first like half it was picking up right where the last issue left off.
And
so that was definitely a little odd to.
That was something I didn't notice the first time I read it because I was reading it as it came out. But like issue 2 picks up half a second after issue 1, and it's not until like issue 6, I think it is. No, I guess it's 4. There's a time jump after the cross, but the time jump keeps you in exactly the same location. It's just after the cops have showed up. And I really liked that. You know, it felt like the whole thing felt like a TV show to me, like that kind of pace and those types of cliffhangers.
I told my wife right after finishing reading it, I said this probably would make like a really good like single season HBO Watchmen style TV
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of fits in the sort of tone of some of the True Detective.
Yeah.
You know, it could fit in there. So it follows this FBI agent who is pretty quickly discovered by the daughter of the main antagonist.
How quickly do you think he actually is discovered? Because we don't get the reveal that it's for sure until like more than halfway through.
Well,
I don't feel like he was being all that subtle sometimes, especially as time went on. He got very not subtle. Like he was pretty willing at first, up until about the point where I think she mentions to her dad, like, he seems too willing, and then he started to like fight them on everything they said, and it was like, oh, okay, where are you going with this? I don't know. I felt a little confused by that and was hoping, and if you guys could maybe elucidate on that.
I felt like he was generally consistent in, you know, not approaching them and being like, yeah, I'm white and I hate black people or whatever. He, you know, was just he acted the part of someone ready to be duped into joining this group and ready to be, you know, convinced that, you know, talked into the mindset of a white supremacist / white nationalist.
I guess he just felt
including that reluctance. Yeah.
He just felt kind of incompetent from their perspective. Like they kept telling him to do stuff and then he would screw it up. And then like, why would you keep trying to groom this guy if he's no good at what he's supposed to be doing?
Unless you think she found out really early and that's why.
Like
I mean, I was also going to say, you know, we all fall for the ploy of the mediocre white guy. So
yeah,
sure.
I think
present company excluded.
Wait a minute.
The biggest show of his hand, I think, was the fight right at the beginning.
Yeah, but even right, yeah, that fight. But then by the way, if I had a vote on the MVP for the most gut wrenching part of this, it's when he has to, in the second issue, I think, is when they have that altercation with the gun and does he shoot the guy or he accidentally shoots him again, right? Or he just gets framed for it or something, but like
he
shoots
the white guy.
He shoots the black. He shoots the black guy, right?
Yeah,
that's trying to shoot
the guy that they're jumping gets the gun out of the blonde guy.
In issue 3, I think then. But ultimately, I think he did a great job at that, because when he was trying to walk away from that, he was just like, he didn't get recruited into this crew because he was a racist, because he wasn't. He got recruited into this crew just because he showed up at a thing. Like, not everybody that reads Win Morgan's books was a racist, so he just showed up and said it. And I think the way that he tried to walk away from it in that third issue, where he was like, no, like, screw this, I'm not doing that. Like, that's a thing a dude just might do because it was an awful thing that he was.
That's a big ask.
With. Yeah.
Again, we've already, well, last week we spoke with the disclaimer that we're a bunch of white people talking about this, and I'm also assuming none of us are white supremacists. But so
I'm not.
But it would be interesting kind of seeing what lines up in terms of what the genuine recruitment tools are for these kind of movements. I think we're definitely in an age where there's a lot of material around discussing the kind of debate methods of the alt-right, the recruitment methods of white supremacist groups, and kind of lining those up with what happens in here. It would be really interesting to see how much research was done on that angle.
Well,
it seems like he also wanted to show that the groups themselves didn't necessarily like each other and weren't necessarily aligned with each other. They were a little bit thrown in together, but there was like a lot of infighting.
Right. I definitely felt like the crux of it was definitely the kind of political conservative versus the kind of grassroots the grassroots kind of soldiers in the movement. Yeah, and all of these being at kind of cross purposes.
Yeah,
It's definitely a good way of telling the story.
On that note, how did you guys feel? So I was super cognizant. Full disclosure in this, like, I know we're not going to get super deep into politics, but like, I grew up in like the Bible Belt of Indiana, which was basically like, I grew up thinking like Christian is Republican because they don't kill babies. Like, that's basically all I had. And it's not like I haven't 180'd from that. There's a lot of things that I still, I guess I consider in the whole realm of every part of politics, like a lot of you do too. But when I read something like this, there's so many people that I love that I know that I don't necessarily agree with anymore, but I absolutely trust their hearts. They've just come up to different conclusions than I have. So all that to say, when I read something like this, I'm really cognizant of what somebody who wouldn't agree with me or wouldn't agree with what is clearly the main impetus of this book, what they would say reading it. And I think I was personally impressed with the consideration for lots of different types of people in a book that was clearly calling out one specific.
so it wasn't like a bunch of arch villain racists. Everybody who you
No.
saw had some depth, and you could kind of see where they drew their conclusions about.
Yeah, and and of course, gosh, what's the main daughter's name? Like, her struggle was
Jessica,
Kim?
Yeah.
was it?
I think.
Yeah, she was.
Okay.
She
Jennifer.
was.
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
She was complicit in it to a degree, but also
Totally
aware
was.
of the bullshit and not really necessarily knowing how to, I don't know, navigate because it's her family.
Mhm.
I think that was something that was also done really well in like Superman Smashes the Klan. If you guys read that, where just there's the young boy in that who just really struggles with the idea that his family could be evil,
Right.
and so tries to justify all of these ideas because he just can't accept the idea that his family could be this evil. So I felt like I saw different shades of that going on, but at the same time, she's like totally complicit in all the actions and not doing anything to stop it.
Yeah, I like the kind of multiple layer that she represents. Yeah, people who are born into these groups. There are people who are recruited due to dissatisfaction. There are people who start these movements in order to gain personal power, and there are people who are born into it. And she is that.
Mm-hmm.
And her daughter, in turn, is the person who's so far been sheltered from it. But at the end of the entire story, there's the question mark over her.
Mm-hmm.
Because she could still be brought into that.
That was kind of a gut punch for me from that degree, because it seemed like there was a lot of work being done to try to keep her out of that, whether it was by her mother or by I can't even remember the main character's name. Rick. You know, kind of like, you know, his goal seemed like he was to try to remove her from the situation, and in the end, she's right in the middle of it now. Mm-hmm. And you know, the indoctrination is gonna hit her hard. You know, most likely. Obviously, her grandfather was grieving and pulled out of the race, but that doesn't mean he's going to change his opinions. In fact, it might solidify his opinions even harder. And that daughter's now going to just grow up in this, and you know, she's been innocent and pure up to this point, but now what kind of, you know, monster might she become because of this?
It looked to me like Roman had something to say. He unmuted and his body language changed.
No, I said Jennifer when everybody's trying to think of her name.
Can you mention Roman's body one more time, though?
Jennifer.
It's what's up.
It is what's up.
Where are you at? Well, since you're unmuted, Roman, give us a opinion or a wisdom tidbit or something.
Well, I kind of wish I could back out now, because you all obviously like this a lot more than I did.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I
would love to hear the opposite of it as a comic critique, like if nothing else, you know. Okay,
well, because I was all excited to read this, because this is the first one we've done, or you've done, that I haven't read before. So I was like, oh, cool, something I haven't done. And when I read the back cover, I was really excited because the former FBI agent Rick, his actual name is Richard Wright, which is a real African American author in American literature that was very important. He wrote Native Son and Black Boy, and actually something called American. Oh geez, I think he got the title. Hill got the title from the actual Richard Wright's American Revelation or something like that. So I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a real deep dive into, racism and all the matters around that with Trump's presidency and everything. And I ended up kind of feeling like, wow, this is a lot of that stuff is mentioned, but it's all kind of surface level, I thought. And it doesn't really get into stuff. Like I wanted at least a little nod from one of the other characters or somebody, just some kind of, or in the narration about, well, why is he named Richard Wright? What's going on there? And I thought maybe the story would reveal that and portraying Rick. And unless I just totally missed it, I was like, well, I guess maybe that was just a cute little nod to the actual Richard Wright, because I don't see how it's tied in at all.
I definitely thought it was going to go deeper. To your point, after the second page, when I put the book down and was like, it's going to be a while, honey. Like, like I definitely thought we were going to get a little bit deeper in that. So on that note, then, like, does anybody have an opinion on whether it like needed to, or whether it's okay that it didn't? And then I'm also curious too, like what other comics or graphic novels do go deeper while still having a good story,
So
kind of a feeling about that. Just, I think he really, really, really didn't want his own viewpoint to come through, was kind of the sense I got. And so he wanted to present a lot of different people from all sorts of different backgrounds and ideologies, which is a really interesting approach. But I think that's why it felt shallow, is because
did he say that in the interview? Was that where you got that then?
Yeah, I was just I just came off reading some interviews with him, and that was definitely part of his mission statement. And I think he didn't want to have a mouthpiece character, but it led to that kind of problem where you're not sure who to identify with.
Yeah, and it's also, and it's interesting, one of you said that it was supposed to be a longer series originally, and I heard that, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because I definitely like the first half better than the last half. I felt like around issue 6 or so, it was just kind of like, okay, let's wrap this up, and then to an ending that was, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Basically, as soon as he gets kind of exposed, you expect that to be more of a dramatic event than it is for the rest of the book.
Well, it should have been like the shift in the second half, but because of the length, it ended up just being the beginning of the falling action. So it was like, okay, now he has to have a team up with the Obama mask guy. Okay, now he has to whatever, and he's just like checking off the rest of the stuff on his storyboard.
Yeah,
rather
and you always
than making
wanted
a whole second half.
Yeah, and you always wanted a bit more of a slow reveal of the Obama mask guy as well, like what his whole deal is, and
because we don't really end up getting that much other than like he's a cop.
That was an interesting reveal. Yeah, I like that they set him up to be someone that but you just know him because he's a cop.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting point. I think I had assumed he was pretending to be a cop, but he was a cop.
He's got the car and everything.
That makes more sense. It's
Yeah,
because I thought that was the interesting good observation at the time that has become way more relevant in the past year.
And like you, Mike, I thought that I didn't think he actually was a cop. I thought he's so good at his job, he stole a cop car and a uniform and was just pretending.
Well, and because they could have, with another couple of issues, they could have, done a little bit more of a kind of underlining of that. Having a cop funeral where the guy's being, getting a
honored.
And draw a bit more attention to.
I couldn't help but compare a lot of this.
On you go.
Sorry, I was lagging out, so then I was interrupting you.
That's okay. That wasn't going anywhere.
Will's turn.
I couldn't help but compare a lot of it to American History X while reading it. Just a lot of little parallels of like, you know, the groups kind of not agreeing and then all still secretly doing business with each other, you know, saying one thing but then doing another thing, and all the hypocrisy tied into it. But just kind of on that same conversation about, you know, the ending, like the endings it was similar but different at the same time. And I think that, you know, while both were tragic, you know, American History X, you know, was tragic, but had a bit more of a positive message, I guess, to it, to me at least, and there's some more messaging behind it of violence begetting violence and hate being baggage and everything else that came out of it. So like, you know, the character in that was kind of, even though he was killed, he was saved a bit before he was killed. Whereas this, I struggled with it a little bit more because it almost left me feeling a little bit more hopeless, that like despite all these efforts, nothing really changes.
Do you think it did a good job at finishing like that though? Like how some things are like Spielberg movies, and then there's depressing movies, and then there's like the everything is awful, like it's just kind of a chaotic ending. And I feel like that's what he tried to do, but I'm wondering if you think he accomplished it.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to decide if that was intentional or not, because it left me asking a lot more, you know, questions, a lot of the questions that everybody's asking themselves and everybody else right now. And I guess it kind of left me with the idea of just, if we really want like real change to a lot of these big problems, it's going to be a lot more work, and one guy can't come in and save the day and take down these big organizations and save all of these people and change all their horrible ideas. It's going to take a lot more than that. But it also just left me feeling really depressed about how much work that's all going to actually be. To accomplish that, where American History X kind of was like, you know, I don't know. It left me like, oh, people can change, where this left me thinking like, oh, people can't change.
Yeah, I guess everybody in this is pretty locked in. I mean, the daughter, I kind of wonder what else she's done to sabotage her dad in the past. Like, this can't be the first time she's like in some subtle way messed with his plans.
Don't you get a sense though that she hates him more than she hates the racist crap that he does?
Yeah.
Like when she's baked, she says, "I envy you people. You have us to blame for your mistakes." Like that's talking about not having a mouthpiece character, and somebody who clearly like is an anti-racist, like Brian Hill, writing a character to make someone say that is like, you know, like giving a voice to those people in a way, which is kind of horrible, but also really interesting to hear, because we all know people that aren't quite anti-racist, let's just say.
The Jennifer character was so intriguing to me. I mean, she was a terrible person, but I thought, I love those like morally ambiguous characters, and just like one of the best like what even is her deal sort of characters I've read in a long time. And she obviously had her own agenda, and I kind of wish I didn't need it to all wrap up tidily, but I kind of wish I knew more about what that was, and I feel like that got cut off at the end for sure.
The fact that she seems to be like the linchpin in a lot of it. She's the kind of go-between from the sort of, you know, the redneck foot soldier types and her father and various other, you know, kind of managing of his business as well. She's definitely the sort of consigliere character who's, you know, involved in everything. On her father's behalf, so that he doesn't have to get his hands dirty too much.
And they hinted that she was kind of the person behind everything, but then didn't actually pay that off. I wonder if that was maybe a beat that had to get cut out at the end or something.
Yeah, I guess for me, she didn't come off as like behind everything. She honestly, she felt like an overworked secretary to me. Like she was just handling the bullshit, and it, in a lot of ways, that it didn't seem like her father really saw her as much more than that most of the time. Like,
well, I think that's why she was mad.
This. Yeah, exactly. Like, you deal with this. You're a woman here, and like she mentions like that like she knew her father wanted to have a son, and that her father was disappointed when she was born a woman or a girl, and like she just seems really angry the whole time. So
And now
like
I'm
she can't
stuck
even
on.
like when she finally gets that outlet to like express how angry this whole thing has made her, she can't shut up to save her life, literally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if she just could just keep her mouth shut, she would have been fine. But like she's finally being given someone who, from her point of view, is listening to her and her injustices in her life, and like it makes it almost even more tragic because this whole time that like Rick is using her to get this evidence, and like I don't exactly feel bad for her because she's complicit. Like there's a reason like that we've included a white woman in this role, because white women have been like ushering in like racism through the years, so they just also get to step back and be like, oh, I was just doing it because of my husband or my father, and take no responsibility for it. So
I just watched the first episode of a history of the mafia in New York in the 70s. It's on Netflix, and one of the mob guys at some point says that they would see the FBI hanging out on the block or whatever, and they'd say hi to them because everybody knew that they were going to do what they were going to do, and the FBI was going to do what they were going to do. And like, I'm going to break the law, and if you can catch me, then you can arrest me. Like that's the game that we're playing. And so like Jennifer's kind of playing that game too, where they both have roles to play, and they're both playing each other, and it's kind of like everything's fair,
which is
until
an
it's
interesting
over.
angle as well, because you can flip it and see that they're both trapped in their situations, that neither of them have any escape.
Right.
So all they have is each other to kind of test those boundaries with, on a political level, on a sexual level. Yeah.
So when his handler shoots him in the end, what did you all think of him setting her up with the same situation that he had that lost him his job at the FBI?
So I was actually a little confused about that, because so like there's this narration over that part of the issue, but at the very end, like it shows that she has a voicemail from him on her phone. So that actually left me confused as to whether or not she had known that how much she knew when she showed up to arrest him. Like obviously it's still kind of the same situation. Like he knew what he was doing when he didn't announce what he was pulling out of his pocket.
Right.
Like he was an FBI agent. He would know that like, hey, if you don't want law enforcement to shoot you, you say, I'm grabbing this out of my pocket. Please don't shoot me.
I found
And
it
also be white.
Yeah. It's absolutely suicide by cop. It's
Yeah, and I was curious why did Rick put her in that situation to be a suicide by cop, especially
at the same time, like she kind of put him in that situation.
Right. I was, in my
he went all like
cursory-
dead zone at the end. So
was he trying to set it up so that like he's the bad guy in this story? So like he's trying to say, I'm the bad guy. You've been hunting me in this or working in this organization. I almost took that as like you could then use me to get deeper into investigating this guy and taking him down, and use me as the bad guy to get into this organization because you've been tracking all of this activity and all the racist things and everything else that's been happening.
I think it's also a way of tidying everything up, because bear in mind she kind of brought him in kind of off the books. So this is to kind of clean her hands, because he has now murdered someone while doing a non-sanctioned investigation on her behalf. So he dies. It's just he killed someone. She killed him. No further questions about his motives or anything like that because he's dead. I might kind of flick through before we started recording. The thing that stuck out to me in his confession is first thing he says in his voicemail confession to her is, "I've eaten the sin, Sheila. You don't have to do that anymore. He's finished now. And I'm the monster you've always needed." So yeah, I had to remind myself of the concept of sin eating, which is an old tradition, predominantly Welsh and sort of Midlands England, of people literally eating the sins of the deceased. During funeral rites, you would pay some poor people to come into your home during the funeral rites and eat a meal that symbolically represented them eating the sins of the departed, a way of kind of posthumous absolution from sin.
And all of that is dramatized in the newest issue of Spider-Man this week. So I had just read a comic all about sin eating, and then the next comic I read was this, and I was really pleased to have it that fresh when they mentioned it in here.
In Nick Spencer's run?
Yeah, it's the setup to the next the next big arc.
Yeah, and it's the return of an old villain called the Sin Eater.
The Sin Eater. What were you going to say, Rhett?
Well, I was just going to say, I kind of disagree with that wrapped up the ending. I thought it was confusing because she had had a relationship with him, and then he was also an FBI agent. So she wasn't just killing. I thought it was very suspicious. Like, why is she killing this ex-lover? You know, what is the superiors and the FBI going to think? And if anybody else had known that they were together or that he was a previous FBI agent, I thought that it was kind of I just had a lot of questions.
Someone else does know. What's his name? I kept mentally calling him. Yeah, I kept mentally calling him Copley and be like, no, wrong comic.
You mean George?
Yeah, George. George knows about it. Like that's that entire scene. He doesn't really seem to do anything about it. But he seems to be using it more because he wants in.
Yeah.
But
in the voicemail, I felt like they were kind of presenting it like this is the only way that you don't get in trouble and that we tie up loose ends. But I felt like that was far from a foregone conclusion. And like this book really worked for me, but the ending didn't really work for me. But
no, I would like if it was what Rhett said more. Like, I don't want this to just be Christian Bale Dark Knight. Like, that's cool if he's going to be that, but I don't think it did it as well as Dark Knight or The Vision or so many other beats that have done that. And if it's something more along the lines of like what Rhett said, of just kind of maybe it was supposed to be something else but didn't do it quite as well, I'm almost like more okay with that, because if he got his 3 issues taken away from him or something, it's like,
the tone was I guess was more kind of Romeo and Juliet, kind of all our punish Ed kind of.
See, for me, I thought that there was it felt like a little bit of cruelty on Rick's part, putting her and she put him in an awful position, but making her kill him like that at the end, and which kind of tied into his all of a sudden at the beginning, I think, of that issue, he's revealing that he's into the Bushido code and everything, and no matter what, going in and getting retaliation. And I kind of felt like, wow, so is he putting his old mentor in this position? There's a little bit of retaliation on his part against her.
Do we really believe that did she have enough reason to believe that Rick would potentially be pulling out a gun to shoot her or himself? Like, is there really enough evidence here to think that was her only option, was to shoot him?
I don't know if there's any evidence of that. I think it was just like so many people in real life, pulling something out of their pocket. It's night, and so she's going to react the way she's been trained to react.
Yeah.
And she was saying that, there's a way, as she's crying and got her gun out, she's, we can figure out a way to get out of this, and then he pulls it out.
Oh, we got cut by 3 issues. This is the only way.
You can read it because there's so little that is said in that scene. You're getting all of the stuff that's in the voicemail that he's already recorded. All that you have is why. You know why, Sheila. Rick, there's a way through this. We can find. She's already crying by this point. And he says, shh, no more words. He looks peaceful. She pulls the gun on him. She says, Rick, please don't. And then he goes, looks kind of sad, reaches for something. She shoots him.
Mm-hmm.
She could have thought he was going to kill himself.
I think that's the more believable one. Yeah, she's basically said like, it was like a just so you know, if you do this, here's the eventuality. So it didn't really matter what he was grabbing or what he was doing. She'd like already committed to the idea that if he tries anything funny, that's my only option. That's why her face is freaking leaking everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you
In
think?
the X-Files, though, they always manage to just shoot each other right through the, totally safe zone in the shoulder to stop them from doing bad stuff. So I feel like all the FBI agents would have this training.
It sounds like all FBI agents should just have unusable arms from all of the shoulder wounds that they get.
I was gonna ask, do you guys think that like that narration in the last few pages was like the voicemail that he had sent?
I mean, I thought it was because it shows like, like I don't blame you at all, and then she's looking at the voicemail, and then the next page she's sitting looking at her phone and it says not even a little, kind of finishing it. So that's to me what told me that was the voicemail.
Did you think it was something else, Andy Carly?
Or are you thinking the very last page?
Well,
go on, George, I'm listening.
Well, what Nathan was saying, it seemed like he had told her that he was telling her that, or he had like texted her or sent her a letter or something telling her what to do.
That was my first instinct for sure.
And then I got to the voicemail and I was like, okay, so was that the voicemail, or did she not kill him? Or I that's why I wasn't.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, I kind of hadn't been thinking about like the narration saying about him pulling out of the thing at the top. So now looking at that again, it makes me think that maybe she's just listening to the voicemail again.
Mm-hmm.
But that
to reassure herself
really
that this was something he
he
forced
got
her
it.
voicemail notifications work.
The
I
phone's
think
locked
that,
and it says notifications. So
I think that closes the loop. But if he told her beforehand, that would close the loop a little bit on why she felt the need to shoot him, because she gets instructions, let's say, over text that say, he did not listen to your instructions. You found the suspect armed and at large, et cetera, et cetera. And then she like comes into the situation with a bunch of assumptions that he's going to do something crazy.
Well, he had to call her to the beach, right? So she didn't know where he was. So my impression is it was a voicemail, or a voicemail up front, and then maybe she was just reviewing it later again.
Yeah.
Somebody call Brian Hill.
That's what I can. That's what I concluded, but it was confusing.
Emily's our correspondent.
I do think it's kind of interesting though, because that scene where she's about to shoot him also parallels with the earlier scene in issue something when she's like failing to hit the target at the shooting range.
Oh, right.
It almost makes me wonder if maybe like she wasn't sure she'd actually hit him, or maybe she did try to hit him non-lethally and missed.
So I think
that's foreshadowing. You're right.
I think she listened to the. I think she listened to the voicemail twice. I think she got the first one, went to the beach, and then it ends with her sitting at her desk listening to it again.
Yeah.
That's what I think happened.
Because he's definitely dead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked back at that page and I'm like, there doesn't seem like there's a lot of room for him to be alive.
No, and we see her, I think, at his gravesite.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's another, like, it's mirroring against Jennifer's funeral.
Yeah.
So now that we solved that, what else did you guys like? What else did you love?
Reading it as it came out, I loved the scene where I was convinced that they had just shot the main character to death with a shotgun.
Totally agree.
I was like, that is ballsy.
That was an awesome page turn.
Yeah.
And then the next one with him like getting up out of the sand, I was like, wait, which comic am I reading again?
Yeah.
Well,
what were you gonna say, Emily?
Oh, I was gonna say I had my like, oh yeah moment when the bad cop goes to pull over Sheila and she's just like, no thanks, and totally like handles it. That was badass.
Yeah.
Quite early on. I'm frozen.
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. Quite early on, I like the examination of Richard. His recruitment into being undercover, I think, cop initially, is what you see him being interviewed for, or is it agent straight away? I can't remember. I love this page where it's him in previous undercover positions and showing how good he is at doing that, at convincing people, getting them to trust him. But also there was the examination of how much his background kind of fed into that, which I don't know is a complicated one, because there are a lot of tropes wrapped up in that about mixed race, biracial characters in media having that kind of tragic backstory of being from two worlds and all that kind of stuff, which can also just be an accurate reflection of real life, but it's in media, so it becomes a trope.
Right. I liked when he when she picks him up to take him to meet her dad, or to go fight the racists in the backyard for fun. I really liked that what he did was fall asleep in the car. And I thought, like, that is, I don't know if he's asleep or if he's pretending, but that's got to be a really good way to get in with somebody like that. Like, oh yeah, I'm clearly not an FBI agent. FBI agents wouldn't sleep in this situation.
It's baring your throat.
Yeah.
He probably had to give up a lot of his instincts if he really did fall asleep there, like to actually not be paying attention to what's going on because he's so disarmed.
Yeah.
I really liked how every debrief had like these really long shots of the buildings, really like next to like the really thin panels. I just liked the perspective it gave, and like, I don't know.
Yeah, the art is wonderful.
Django, did you notice at one point he got all like Mark Russell on us and gave us the one-liner about like the only reason hate isn't the ugliest thing in the world is because shame exists?
Yeah.
I don't even think that fit this book super well, but like for a lot of reasons that once you all get to know me a lot better, I really, really thought that was an amazing thing to put shame like below hate.
Well, wasn't it Wynn who said it?
No, Jennifer did.
I think Jennifer says it.
Yeah, she said it to him in their initial interview in the diner. One thing I'll give, I don't know, Hill or Fernandez credit for, when he shoots, so this is in like issue 2 or 3 at that little altercation, when he accidentally shoots the black guy and he realizes it at the top of the page here, and then it goes down to the rest of his reactions. I think the timing of that was absolutely perfect. It wasn't a page turn reveal. It didn't need to be. It was a guy standing over 2 dead bodies just going, Jesus. And it was like a matter of fact statement. And then he drops to his knees. And then he says, oh, Jesus Christ. And then he screams out, like, because he's realizing, oh my gosh, I did this before. Oh my gosh, I'm undercover. Oh my gosh, I'm not even being an FBI agent right now. And all these things. And I think it just was the perfect amount of panels to get there.
Yeah.
And early on in a book like this, that gave me, like, I gave it a lot more freedom to do anything after seeing something that worked that well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was my favorite sequence in the book. And I thought Rick was more interesting in this portion of the book than he is later on, because you see the confliction and everything. Later on, he's just resigned and determined.
He feels a little bit self-destructive in a similar way to Dash in Scalped, to me. Like they've got some similarities in my head brain, and maybe it's because I haven't read Scalped in a while, but I think that they're both kind of trying to do a good thing and not really being selfless about it, but not caring whether they live or die throughout whatever they have to do.
So, I thought chapter 6 was really creepy. Whenever I was reading it, it was where he was just going into the whole philosophy of his.
I was about to say the first 5 pages. Yeah,
it was just really creepy. was experiencing this kind of language in this dialogue with one of my friends or ex-friends, I'm not sure yet, but it was just really, really hit home. It was like, oh my gosh, he just nailed it so well. And it just, gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's chilling and it's distasteful, and you just want to dismiss it out of hand because of what it is. But you need to read this. We need to know what these talking points are in order to combat them.
One of the things that I found most chilling about it is that it's so well put together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so matter of fact.
Exactly.
Like,
it was clearly
if you were just somebody else reading this, you'd be like, yep.
Yeah. It's Wynn he's very real. He's very reasonable in his horribleness.
I think what was especially effective was what was particularly effective is how you start, like, particularly in the first page, and then less so as each page goes on. This seems like a political ad. This is shot like an advertisement. You're seeing all of these images. You're hearing all of these talking points addressed in this very broad speech. But then it turns out it's just him talking to just Rick.
Yeah.
And that kind of disarms you for a second. What seems like a horrible political ad turns out to just be him speaking with another person in private.
Well, it's almost like if you just tweak somebody's assumptions or change your priorities a little bit, that can completely alter the way that you think about the world. Like, this is all very rational if you just make a couple of tweaks to what you would hope somebody would think,
This is where it had a lot of this is where I really started to see some of the similarities with, like, American History X, because in that movie there's like the dad is kind of saying a lot of these ideas to the kids that are just kind of slowly planting these ideas in his kid's mind that seem like they're smaller ideas, but they plant these seeds and they grow into something bigger. And it's coming from a family member. It's coming from somebody you love and you trust that leads you down this path of these poisonous ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I also just want to notice the symbolism about, like, eating from the tree of knowledge. It's just like the teacher and the pupil,
but more menacing.
Well, and the black with the teeth standing out is creepy as well.
Yeah. I love how
in a few
evil
places.
it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, like Wynn said, it's done in a few places, not just with Wynn too. It was done with the Obama mask guy right before he died.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't find the other one, but
there was the one with Jennifer where it was just her blonde hair stood out.
That one. I really liked his, again, like, I think Nathan or Will was saying earlier, his use of shadows was so good.
Mm-hmm.
It made you really focus on, I feel like, on the emotion of the moment, and and then compared with the colors, like Rhett was saying, I was feeling it, but I didn't know it, with how they were changing moods. And it was amazing. The art and the coloring was definitely my favorite part of this. Not saying that the writing was bad, it was also great.
So we talked about this well, I talked about this a couple of times. We've talked around this a couple different times, but also taking into account what Roman said, where now that I think about this more, every book can have a place, and the fact that it didn't go deeper, I'm trying to wrestle with, like, man, are you not using a platform to the full? And I still don't know about that. But one thing I think I do respect about this is that when we've got in 2018 and 2019, when this is written, he has a clear face for the more idiotic side of racism in our country. There's like a clear understanding of what that is that we can see every day on Twitter, represented by very powerful people, the powerful person. And for Win Morgan to not be that, I think I guess artistic wise, it impressed me a little bit to write a character in a book who has a ton of Trump comparisons for the idea that just he's a celebrity, He's a person who has followers and who is intentionally duping people into thinking something that he doesn't think, but he's so much more calculated and not callous about it. And I think researching into a different version of that character was kind of refreshing to me, rather than just rehashing what you could do if you just go to the president's Twitter account, you know?
Well, yeah, I think he represents a kind of figure in extreme right-wing politics that absolutely exists, and makes up a lot of Trump's advisors. Stephen Miller, people like that. They're this person.
Yeah, it was almost like instead of exaggerating somebody for fiction, they're pulling back and making something more subtle, which is not what we usually get.
There was even a line in there where they did draw a bit of reference to the president and needing his support, and him just being, oh, well, I could just play to his ego. I just have to compliment him a little bit.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I did think, Nathan, that was really good how Morgan decided to pull out of the race, because he could have totally, used that tragedy to spin it into, make his daughter a martyr and winning the race. And that was really interesting. I actually think that Morgan is the most fleshed out character in the book. Because the other characters, I feel like we were told their points about their personality and thing, but we weren't shown as much as we were with Wynn. And I do wonder if, like, okay, well, the next time election season comes around, he'll run then. Yeah. He hasn't given up, not yet.
Well, we're coming up on an hour. Does anybody have anything really cool or anything?
I mean, I have like one thing I do want to talk about, just because it didn't really ever come up. So, like, for anyone who hasn't read the book, watching the stream, Jennifer's daughter is deaf, and I really love the way that whoever did the letters on this, I'd have to let me see if they have a separate letter listed. Pat Brousseau. I don't know if he did the word balloons or not, but I love the way that they indicate that Rick is signing with Amy. Let me see if I can.
Oh yeah.
Like the little, like, you get the little bubble that you would usually get, but then it leads to a text box to kind of show us that, like, this is the gist of what he's saying.
Has anyone seen that before? Ro, looking at you.
Not that I remember.
There was some interesting sign language translation in comics in the Hawkeye series, but it wasn't like this.
Yeah, the stuff in the Hawkeye series was a little more like literal translation, where this is just giving the gist of what's being said, because, like, I can't say too much because I've only taken 1/4 in college of sign language, but kind of the first thing you learn when you start learning sign language is the grammar is completely different.
Like, not transliterating.
I taught sign language in high school for 2 years, and it's essentially it's kind of built around the subject first. So you establish the subject and then everything after that.
And like, so you're getting the gist. You're not gonna get you're not gonna get the literal thing, because that would be really difficult in these school to click panels, and that's not what, like, they're not trying to go all Hawkeye issue. I think it was like issue like 20 or something.
It was all like that.
That was entirely sign balloons and stuff. So
I really
I appreciated that they did that to show that, like, they're still communicating and this is what's being communicated, but obviously because of what we've learned about the characters, they're not actually speaking out loud. Right. They are signing.
I really like the scene where the room gets shot up and she's got no idea because she's not in.
Runs in and is signing at her to,
I thought that was an interesting, like, that's how protected she is from what's going on around her.
Yeah, because it also felt like a bit of a metaphor. Like, she doesn't know any of this is happening, because no one's going to sign about racism to a little girl, I assume.
Right.
I like the story he tells her in the middle as well, and how that's represented a little tiny injection of a sort of fantasy into the middle of this very real, very grounded book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then later she asks if Grandpa is a bad person,
Mm-hmm.
and that felt
I like
very telling, especially considering where she ends up at the very end of the story.
Yeah.
I liked when the tarot cards busted out, because I knew that Andrew ran across his apartment to his roommate to have probably a 2-hour-long discussion about tarot cards.
Not this time, unfortunately.
I really like the shotgun art. I just thought it was really well done, very detailed, and I hadn't seen that in a book before. Just like where the collar was Swiss cheese and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously, I think that this was done. I'm not sure if this was done after or concurrently with Volume 1 of Old Guard, but like that shot made me think of a lot of the end of issue 2 of the Old Guard, when, like, I don't feel like this is a huge spoiler, but like they get back to meet up with the rest of the Old Guard after picking up the newbie, and the guy's got like half his head blown off.
Yeah.
That's just the final panel of the issue, is like them being like, oh no, he's dead. Like, yeah, he's dead, but he'll be fine. He's just gotta throw his brain back.
Well, so we just talked about basically politics, for like current politics for a while, and next week we'll talk about future politics with
There's
the
only 2 volumes left.
penultimate volume of East of West, which is pretty exciting. I don't know if you guys know this, but when we locked the door at the store on March 18th, I went home that night with all 9 volumes of East of West, and I thought, I'm going to read this week. I can't do anything else. And so here we are, 4 months later, and I'm almost there.
And finally, the stuff I haven't read yet in East of West. And I'm really excited.
Yay!
That's one of my favorite ways to read something long, is to read the first big bunch of it and then reread it right before the end, so I can go in with the right things spoiled and a fresh memory of it.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks for talking about American Carnage. Hopefully we can do American Venom when they put out the sequel.
Hey,
There's
buddy.
Tom Hardy in that one.
Hate isn't the worst thing in the world. It's shame. So sorry.
Hey, Nathan, are you going to make your wife read this one now too?
We did talk about it a little bit. We had a long discussion today about how AOC just did her big hour-long talk on and about getting called an F and B by another senator or another rep, and a big discussion that we had based on this, which I thought was this did a decent job of talking about, is how the terms that are being used in this book that are racially connotative, even though he says at one point that the N-word doesn't work on everybody, and he talks about how not every Black person is the same, they're all their own person. I thought that was really cool. But it's all about that power dynamic, and it's all about when you're reinforcing something that is systematic already. And so that was our discussion that we had talked about, where that's why it was such a terrible thing to call her an F&B, is because it's reinforcing this idea that women are oppressed in everywhere, but in positions of power, even, they're still oppressed. But she could call him a whatever the equivalent of a man would be, and it isn't reinforcing a systemic thing. And this book made me think of it a little bit. So we actually did have a discussion about it, and it was just related to another current event.
A lot of couples read books out loud to each other.
Yeah, we
but yeah, her quote about having a wife and having a daughter not making you a decent man, or making someone or making a man decent, I'm paraphrasing here, definitely was in the forefront of my mind while we were being introduced to Jennifer.
Yes, it totally fits this. You're right.
Yeah, because he's not a decent man, or Morgan isn't a decent man just because he has a daughter and a granddaughter.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. Cool, man. You guys all, props to everybody. Django hinted at it, but we all just talked about politics for a long time. Good job.
We all kept it civil.
The politics
I held
place.
it back, but yeah.
Well, thanks everybody. I guess I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Next week. Have a good one, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good one. Stay safe.
Vote.
Volume 9.